This is Goals with Soul, the podcast for visionary coaches and entrepreneurs, building your business with inspired action. In alignment with your mission and authentic message, so you can create impact for your soul clients and feel lit up every day. I'm your host, Jo Ingram, married mum of 3 daughters from London and a former ad agency director turned business coach and strategist. In Goals with Soul, we blend revenue generation with energetics, marketing strategies with pranic healing, and ambitious business goals with our soul's desires. If you're looking to build your business with less efforting and more ease, this is the podcast for you. Let's dive in. Welcome to Goals with Soul. I'm Joanna Ingram, and today we are addressing boundaries. And if you're immediately thinking, like I did not so long ago, that actually my boundaries are pretty good, then you are in for a bit of a surprise in this particular episode, because so many people walk around thinking their boundaries are good when actually we just don't understand what a boundaried business and a boundaries life really looks like. I'm going to give you a little taste of what that looked like for me. So I've always been someone who has strong opinions. I remember about 15 years ago, I was working with a lawyer on a private civil matter, and she said to me, Joanna, you are very emphatic. And I remember not knowing whether to take that as an insult or a compliment. I think I took it as a little of both. What I realized was that I can come across with a really firm, decisive manner, but I think truthfully it hides a little bit of fear of conflict, it hides an insecurity, and I think many women, particularly those of us who've come through corporate, have learned to project ourselves as having strong boundaries, then just assume that that's who we are. I remember seeing stuff online where people are described as people pleasers. I'm like, you know what, I don't think I'm a people pleaser. Certainly if I don't like something in my private life with my husband, I do express that. I'm somebody that I think tells people when things aren't the way I would like them to be. But actually, you can tell by the slight hesitation there that maybe there's a little bit of doubt. And actually, as I've built my own business and look back over the last couple of years, I've recognized that actually there are boundary issues that have created problems in my business and have me stuck. When I first came out of that burnout period after 6 months in my business, I really noticed that I hadn't been working with those clients that had lit me up. I realized that actually my boundaries weren't so much not in place with not stating my opinion, but not in place with myself. I didn't notice that when my boundaries were slipping because I gave it a different label. I believed that I was doing the best for my clients. I was going that extra mile. I really, really wanted my clients to succeed. I still do. But I had created a lack of boundaries in what that looked like for myself and in my own business. I would assume that going the extra mile meant doing their homework for them. I mean, it's crazy to say that out loud. Going the extra mile was constantly chasing them and saying, hey, have you done it yet? Not empowering them to be that person for themselves, but moreover, not attracting those people that were those self-starters that appreciated having a strong coach who wasn't going to chase them, who allowed them to expand into their fullness because that's who they are in the first place. And I solved that initially in one way, in one very powerful way that I still teach my clients with phenomenal results. And that is to really get your messaging right, really learn who you are and express that powerfully, because that's one of the most key ways that you will attract those clients that are best matched for you. But it took me a little longer to really understand the second essential piece, and that is business boundaries. Business boundaries for people who don't believe they're people pleasers. Business boundaries for people who are showing up with a powerful intention to create change for their clients and are letting things perhaps slip in their own personal way that they deliver that, because don't even realize it, because we're so busy believing that we know exactly what we want and how to get it, that when we're out of alignment, it isn't instantly noticeable. And the way that I dealt with that for myself was to create what I call a business manifesto. This was a way of me expressing what I was no longer available for. My first business manifesto at the time after burnout included things like I'm no longer available to work with clients who aren't going to just get on and do the work themselves, who don't really want change, who aren't ready for change. And that led me to saying no in discovery calls with kindness and love. The saying that this container that I'm now promoting isn't right for you right now, but come back in the future if it's aligned, and we will make magic in this container. So it's a real boundaried piece to say this isn't aligned to a prospective client, and holding strong even when every bone in your body is like, this is a potential sale. And that's certainly the beginning in that first year. That was a very strong, visceral feeling for me. I'm sure you can relate. So being boundaried and creating what I describe as my business manifesto has been a powerful way that I've been able to repeat over time, tightening up what my business looks like for me. And my business manifesto approach became so powerful that it became an intrinsic part of what I then taught my clients. A client I'm working with at the moment had literally sacked a client who was de-energizing her as a result of creating her own business manifesto. I can see the power in this, because when you want to attract perfectly aligned clients, it's a combination of projecting with powerful messaging that's perfectly aligned and authentic, but doing the work behind the scenes to become that person energetically that attracts those perfect match clients. Because when you tighten it up, you get to call in those clients, you get to attract those clients that are now energetically aligned, not just with your messaging, which is super powerful, but also with how you're creating your business, what you're ready to say yes to. And those yeses are going to match. And I'm going to go into a lot more detail about this in another solo episode coming soon. But today I'm extremely excited because we're going to dive into this topic of boundaries, the topic of saying nope, and what that really looks like for people who are building their businesses in our everyday lives to allow us to create a business that is one of ease and joy. I'm going to introduce you to the lovely Suzanne Culberg. She is an author and coach who helps overgivers and people pleasers learn to set boundaries and say no without feeling mean. She's known for her straight talking, which you're going to see today, as well as her wacky t-shirts, which you probably won't. She's from Sydney in Australia and has a husband and 2 awesome children. And stay tuned in, because we're going to talk about why it's hard to say no and how to create strong boundaries in your life and in your business, and even why people pleasing and saying yes is actually a form of manipulation. So if you want a new perspective on it today, you are certainly going to get that. As always, stay tuned right to the end, because our inspired action invitation is one you are not going to want to miss. And so let's dive in. Hello, Suzanne. Welcome to Goals with Soul.
Thank you so much for having me, Joanna. I'm so looking forward to this.
Oh my God, me too. We've just been chatting a little bit off air, and I know you say it like it is. And I love the fact that even your title, Nope Coach, is kind of pretty out there, pretty clear what you're going to get when you come into your world. Tell me a little bit about what your world looks like and how you got there.
Oh, it's a very long story. So a lot of people do ask and insinuate, it's like, you are so direct. Like, how did this come to be? It's because I used to be such a people pleaser. And I recently came across this title. Like, I've heard doormat before, but someone's like, some people pleasers are exploding doormats. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was me. It was always saying yes to keep the peace, and yes to be polite, and yes to be the good girl, till I reached the point where I was so resentful that I'd just lose it. Don't you ever think about me? What about, exploding doormat? And when you reach that point and you realize, hey, like, I'm the problem here, but I'm also the solution. And the very first time, dozen times, maybe 50 times that you start to say no to other people, and you kind of like gag and go and you're dying inside, but then you live. And you're like, oh my goodness, I have so much peace. I don't have to sell chocolates for the school fundraiser, or man the parent and friends thing, or, help my friend move. Like, I'm not saying, but I've got a bad back. I'm not really much good to people who are moving house. But I'd be like, what I could do instead, I could watch your kids. I could cook you a meal. Because then when you're moving house, you tend to live on pizza. Like, so saying no isn't about just being like nope and unavailable for everything, but it's about saying no to the things that don't serve you and then offering, what does. So what life is like in my world now is I look at my calendar and I'm like, I'm so excited. Like, I get to speak to Joanna today. This is going to be fabulous. Instead of looking at my calendar and going, oh no, like that soul suckingness you have when you have no boundaries. It's like, oh, it's that person. Like, oh my goodness, I don't have any of that. If I start to get that inkling of that with anyone, to me, it's like, well, this is a sign we need to have a boundary conversation, and doing that rather than just going, yeah, it's fine, when it's not.
So good. Like so many things you're saying are sparking thoughts with me. And I want to address one straight away. And that's the word people pleaser. Now, I said in my intro already that I never thought of myself as a people pleaser. You know, when you're scrolling on Instagram and, you know, there's all these flash words to attract people into people's worlds. If I see people pleaser, I just scroll right on. I'm like, I'm just not one of those. I mean, you've met me. I'm just not. And yet I had realized that there were a lot of things about boundaries that I wasn't understanding properly. And I'm curious, do you come across people often who are almost like mind blown when they realize that actually there have been elements of that people pleaser tendency, even though they hadn't labeled themselves as such?
So much. It's such a great question. So my actual messaging, like I work with overgivers, and even that, like I've recently switched to people pleasing because it tends to reach more people. But people will often say to me, a client I coached just this morning, she was like, but Suzanne, I'm not an overgiver. I'm an over controller. Like I like to control things, but I don't overgive. And it's really interesting how we label ourselves. Like, I'm not an overgiver, I'm just generous. Oh, I'm not a people pleaser. Like, but even things like perfectionist, it's so funny. I wouldn't say I'm a perfectionist, but it depends on the context. Like if it's something that I don't care about, it's like near enough's good enough, let's go. But if it's something that I'm really stuck on, then I'll be perfectionistic. So often people, they might not be people pleasing with, say, their in-laws, or they might not be people pleasing with the school. Like there might be aspects of their life where they can so easily say no, but where they're really passionate about, like in their business, oh, I could never say no to a client or a potential client because they might not hire me, or they might not renew, or they might not. So it's a matter of context. Like, are there areas in your life that you people please? It doesn't mean generically. Like I was a generic people pleaser, like just everywhere. Suzanne's the person who will get it done. I remember organizing my sister's birthday party from interstate, like the chairs and the arrangements and who's coming and the RSVPs. I didn't even live in the state. So like all across the board, but a lot of people would say, yeah, I'm not a people pleaser. And then I just ask a few questions and they're like, oh. So
totally. And the biggest question I ask my clients, and you touched on it just now, is if you're not sure what your boundaries are like in your business, look at your calendar. Everything you need to know is right there, probably within 24 hours gone and 24 hours into the future. And if you're stuffing your calendar and you're looking at it and feeling resentment, feeling obligation, feeling exhausted, chances are there are some boundaries in your business that aren't yet in place. And it's just like the spaciousness that's created when you understand what those boundaries are and what you're actually available for in your business, what lights you up, who you want to spend time with, what the purpose is, why you're doing it, and how excited you feel about it. Now you're able to understand, hang on a minute, there's some boundaries that need to be created here, people pleasing label or not. So it's all well and good that you identify yourself as someone that needs to improve your boundaries, but actually saying no, particularly in business, you touched on it just before when you said about saying no to clients when they're prospective clients. I'm thinking, how would you recommend that people actually draw those boundaries and express themselves?
The very first thing I just want to normalize it for anybody listening. Saying no to somebody, like a client or a potential client, is really challenging in the beginning. I remember in my original niche of weight loss mindset, at Christmas and New Year's would be a particularly busy time, as you can imagine, for weight loss. And I would have people message me on like Boxing Day. I don't know if you guys call it Boxing Day there, the day after Christmas. And I'd be like,
of course we do. Here in the UK is where you guys got your culture.
Does.
You get it from the Brits, I'm afraid.
Australia doesn't have any culture. I'll own that. But people would message me and I would drop everything and respond to them. Or people would message me on like New Year's Eve going, can I speak to you tomorrow? I remember one lady, can I speak to you tomorrow morning? So New Year's Day at 7 a.m., I did a discovery call. I am not proud of this. Do not recommend. But
Sorry,
it's really
Suzanne,
common.
just to stop you, I'm going to ask a question everybody wants to know. Did it convert?
No, it
I
did
knew you were
not.
going to say
And
no. Of
this,
course it
and
didn't
this is the
convert.
thing too. When you think about it, somebody who's reaching out to you in a hot mess express who needs help urgently, there's a couple of things. One, chances are you're not the only person they're reaching out to. They're scrambling. They're going to be reaching out to dozens. And two, are they really looking for actual help in that moment, or are they looking for co-regulation? If they've been struggling with their weight for years, then them having that help tomorrow isn't going to, necessarily them being in for long term. And three, if you zoom out for a bit, like if someone is immediately available to me now, my kind of flags go up. It's like, well, they're not that busy, or so there's so many factors that come into this. But I just want to highlight for people, it can be really hard to say, actually, here's the link to my calendar. And then this happens to me now. People will write back and go, but you don't have availability for a couple of weeks. And then I'll say, well, here's some resources. Here's a podcast. Here's a newsletter. Like, here's things that you can do in the meantime, but I'm not making myself overly available, because that's crossing a personal boundary. And if people want it enough, they will wait. And especially if you give them things to chew on, figuratively, in the meantime, because especially now, it's so much easier now, because I teach boundaries. Like, if the person who's like, sure, I'll just whatever, it's like, I'm not going to go to her. But I didn't always teach boundaries, and I did this before I re-niched. But it's like, it's having this, self advocacy and that your time is valuable and you are worth waiting for. But also best fit clients. And this is something you and I were chatting about briefly before we hit record. The people who expect you to drop everything, the people who want you to be on call, the people who want you to answer immediately, are they going to be best fit clients, or are they going to expect that level of treatment all the way through the coaching container? And you wake up and you have like 10 missed messages or voice notes or whatever, and you're like, oh no, like, I don't have that anymore, and I just feel free.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've also been in containers where I see really boundaried coaches and ones that are less so. And I learned it the hard way. Likewise, in that first year, my boundaries were pretty low, all over the place. Just wanted to keep showing up and serving, over-serving. I like to call it over-efforting and over-proving, which is just like, I just want to be so brilliant and I want people to get so much value. I will just keep depleting myself in order to provide that for others. And interestingly, like you spoke about just now, it actually was an energetic cycle of attracting people that were needy. I would think of myself as, in that period, as showing up with mummy energy. I'm like, hey, anyone want a mummy? Here I am. I'll be your mummy. It's like, I'm holding your hand. I'm checking in. I'm like, oh my goodness, you haven't done it. Let me create the Canva post for you. Like, what more can I do to help you take the next step? I was doing general business coaching for new coaches, and putting those boundaries in place in my business enabled me, together with my messaging, to start attracting those women who were showing up with the same energy that I was, in an elevated way. I shut all of that down. I was like, right, I'm no longer available for that. That's not to say that I don't show up with compassion and love and understanding, but sometimes that love and understanding needs to be translated into drawing a boundary that people can source that energy from. If your coach is there holding that space for you, but not doing it for you, is going to allow you to step in with courage and certainty and take that step for yourself. And I know when I've been held by coaches in that regard, it's completely transformed how I show up and the results that I get. And I hold that space for my clients now. I hold it so they can get their highest outcome and do that in a way that's going to make them proud and is going to enable them to continue long after our container has ended. So
that is the point that I think you really nailed there. Allowing them to continue long after the container is closed, because energy meets energy. And as you said, if you're the mothering energy, oh, let me just do that for you. Oh, it's so you've got a boo-boo, and you doing all that. Then when you're not there, when the coaching container ends, what happens to their business or whatever it is that they're building without you there? You have set up a system of of some sort of weird, not quite codependency, but like, you haven't actually enabled them to be resourced enough to use this time together, that yes, you're there as in holding the container available, but encouraging them to do the work themselves to get that transformation so they can take these skills and move on, rather than always require checking in or someone else to tell them they're okay. I think that's such a great distinction. Like, you want the coach there to, my clients call me the velvet hammer, equal parts loving, but very much butt kicking. It's like, you can do this on your own. But setting up the container and the boundaries that way, and being clear on the onboarding, how working together will look, so that people don't expect something, then come into the container and get something that's not what was, sold to them, because we see that happen a lot too.
I love where you're going with this as well, because I understand so well that being boundaried often means being a little bit more buttoned up with what exactly you're going to deliver and what it's going to look like. I'm working with a glorious client at the moment, and one of the things that she's noticed is that she didn't define exactly what it would look like to work with specific clients. So, I used to, when I worked in advertising, we called it brief creep. It was like, you've got a brief and it kind of creeps. It's like, I thought I was going to deliver this, but now I'm little bit by little bit, like a frog boiling in water. I've now started to do this, and now I seem to be doing that for them. And I didn't think that I would be doing all that. And I'm spending so many more hours. Is it even profitable? And even beyond the money, it's absolutely depleting from a time perspective, but also from a self-respect perspective, because you're like, oh, I keep saying yes. How do I stop saying yes? Now I've started and their expectations are just increasing. And the irony is, and my clients saw this, and I saw it for myself back at the beginning, which was that they don't even appreciate it. They're never the clients that will say, you know what, I really see you've gone the extra mile. I'm so appreciative and I'm so happy with my results. They tend to be the clients that say, well, that was good, but where's the next milestone? Why can't I have more? Why can't you help me get beyond here? And it's always a sign from the universe that it's time to tighten up. And it's time to say, if I want to attract glorious, best fit clients into my business, I need to either A, fire these ones that are depleting me at the far end of how you're going to react, or, and this is my preferred one, if you can, actually transmute them into good clients. Start to get stronger, redefine the relationship. Put it to them that they're going to get the best results if actually they learn to do it for themselves. And here's why. And actually, you're no longer available on these hours, but you're happy to put in place an extra opportunity for them to book you at this price if you're available. And actually, they're going to be respectful, right?
I have done both. I have, fired some people, but I have started with the let's, redefine the relationship. And for anybody who's in that place right now, the very first recommendation I would make is own your part in it, because what you allow will continue. Because sometimes when we start a boundary conversation, people will hear, you're not good enough. You don't, they will hear it as an attack. But I remember, so I have a group program. I've done a couple of these times where, I've had to reiterate the boundary or even set a boundary where there wasn't one, because that's the thing too. Sometimes you don't know a boundary's being crossed until it's been crossed. And then if you keep allowing that, it will keep continuing. Your resentment will build, their expectations will build, and it can become kind of messy. So I remember saying to the group, up until now, this is how things have happened here. And, this has been on me. It's nobody's fault. I'm not blaming. This is not meant to make anybody feel bad. But going forward, this is what's going to happen. And, if you're in any way unhappy with this, like if this is bringing up anything for you and you want to discuss it with me personally, here's how to contact me. What it basically was, I will share it, is when I went to group, I'd come from one-on-one, as many of us have. We build our one-on-one practice. It becomes too big, which is great. It's what a problem to have. So we launch a group program. What I didn't do is articulate the value difference between one-on-one and group, because I didn't know it yet, because I hadn't done it before. So, so a lot of my one-to-one clients were like, well, why would I pay that when I can get the group for this? So they transitioned from one-to-one to group, but then they were still receiving from me the same level of support, messenger support, voice support, which I don't offer in the group, but I didn't hold the boundary. So I was basically like, this is a group coaching program. All requests for coaching will be made, henceforth inside the group. I'm not available for DMs. And now I'm not available for DMs in any way, shape, or form. It's so funny. I conduct my business via email, but that's for another reason. But anyway, and if you forget, or if something happens, you're not going to be kicked out. You'll be, tagged in this post and, lovingly reminded that this is how it's going to be, the first time. And the second time, I just won't respond. And it was amazing how it was received. Most people were like, oh, of course. And some people actually apologized. The people apologized for overstepping who never had. But then the couple of people who, not that it was directed at, but who were the boundary checkers, some of them didn't respond well. And one of them basically sent me a barrage of DMs, the one line enter. And I was like, I'm going to stop you right here. I'm open to talk. Send me an email. We can make a time. The one-liners kept coming, and it was very uncomfortable in the time, but man, I learned so much and got a lot stronger. And I haven't had any of those issues ever since.
Yeah, that's really, really powerful. I mean, I know you talk about people pleasing or boundary relaxing as actually a form of manipulation. And it's like, can you explain to us, because we're all going to have our own ideas of what that means, because it sounds kind of negative, and we've always seen people pleasing as, coming from the heart and best of intentions. Tell me about the twist, because I'm hearing in that story the fact that, manipulation, obviously not intentional, not conscious manipulation, but it can end up in a place where you're not actually serving your clients by over-serving your clients.
Well, when you and I were talking before we hit record, I was saying that, people pleasing is a form of manipulation. We all recognize narcissism as manipulation. It's, overt. People pleasing is covert, because you're like, oh, well, I'll just do it this once because they've been a good client or they've been a long-term client, and it won't hurt just this one time. But every time that you say yes when you want to say no, if someone's people still do it to me now. I know you don't respond to DMs, but, and it's that is a boundary violation. If we look at boundaries we look at traffic lights, green is where it's all going smoothly and it's all hunky-dory, and that's how we like to drive with the green lights because we don't need stop and we can get where we need to go faster. Orange is where, technically we should slow down. In Australia, everyone just tends to floor it. So somebody could send you a message and not realize, hey, that this is a boundary overstepping for me. So this is either reminding them or setting them, oh, sorry, I didn't know, I'll send you an email. But red is when somebody knows you're not available for that, and they either just think, oh, well, I've been a long-term client, or we're friends, or, you won't mind just this once. I had one very, very recently. So a client finished up and we weren't working together any longer. And she's like, can we stay friends? And I'm like, of course, However, I don't coach friends. So I just want to be here on the front end that this is going to be friendship stuff now. And it was great. And then she sent me a message and she's like, oh, she asked me about a tool that we'd done in working together. I literally could have answered that question, Joanna, in 3 seconds. And I considered it. And I thought, but where does it stop then? If it's just here, quickly, oh, Suze won't mind. If I was a doctor and I did go to medical school, and I remember at my training once with the local general practitioner, when we spent time in rural areas, we're literally in the supermarket buying groceries, and someone's like, hey, can you just look at this mole? Seriously. And that's what it's like if someone's like, it will only take you a second.
And you know, in that scenario that the doctor, everyone's thinking, what should the doctor say? We all know the doctor should say, book an appointment with me, come down into the surgery and we'll take a look.
And that's exactly what the doctor does do. Because of duty of care, because of they don't have their equipment, they're not in the space. Imagine if you say, look at this mole, oh yeah, it's fine, and it turns out to be skin cancer. That doctor's then liable. So if someone drops you a DM and says, oh, what was this tool you were telling me about or whatever? So I sat with it for a moment. That's another thing too. If you're unsure of a boundary, never respond immediately. Just sit with it. And then I wrote back and I said, I consider this a coaching question. If you want to discuss another package, I'm available for that. I don't want to muddy the waters between what's friendships and what's coaching, so I'm not going to answer this here. However, I'm sure we have covered that in our session. So if you go through your notes, because I email my one-on-one clients' notes, I'm sure you'll find the answer there. Because once again, people are usually able to find the thing. It's like the other one, when someone messages you, what time is the call? Like that's another thing in my group. People would be saying, what time's the next call? So I have to go and have a look in the group to then answer and let you know, like you could do that yourself. So what are you really asking me for here? And it's like, if it's something that they're perfectly capable of doing, but they just want that kind of like, it's like what you were talking about, the mothering energy. Oh, here you go. I'll do, it's like, if you want to know what time the call is, you know where the calendar is, go look it up, but not from, I don't care. But imagine, especially if you're on a group program, if every single member, what time is the next call? Where's the Zoom link? I don't have my headphones, like just all these things. What are we really going to the coach for? It's like, it's the co-regulation, or it's I see you, or it's that, do that thing in the group, not in their DMs.
Yeah, 100%. I also kind of want to say that for anyone listening that's thinking, oh, here's all the boundaries that I need to draw, that really isn't the case, because everybody has personal boundaries. It isn't like, I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't do that, I shouldn't do this. It's about being yourself within the boundaries, and whether you feel good or whether you feel resentment. And I know that sometimes I work with some amazing one-to-one private clients, and I'm going to tell you something, I don't always finish on time. I always check in with them. I'm like, do you have a little bit of extra time? Because I'm feeling in flow. I'm feeling like we are on something and we're just going to get this bit done. And I'm not going to personally, because I have the time on this particular call, going to cut it at the o'clock. We're done. See ya. Because for me, I feel fantastic finishing that piece. Now, don't get me wrong. If I have a hard stop and I have another meeting, I make sure at the beginning, I explain, by the way, I've got a hard stop, so we'll need to finish on time. And as a coach, it is incumbent upon me to make sure that I've drawn that conversation to a close, and I've made sure that we've finished in a really strong, good way that's going to feel natural. But I don't coach my own clients and say, you have to stop at o'clock. You have to. No, you have to feel into it, and you have to make it clear to your client what the case is. If I've got a hard stop, you're going to know it. If I've got a little flex and the conversation flows for an extra 5 minutes, these are clients that I'm helping with really big transformations. And sometimes when you're in the mid-flow about what their messaging is and being authentic, it makes sense to just allow that piece to come to a natural close. So I want to put it out there that it's about you deciding what your boundaries are, rather than making a list right now. I mean, I'll just add something else on that about discovery calls. I love how you mentioned earlier about that New Year's Day discovery call, that of course it didn't convert. We all knew it wouldn't convert. Energetically, it was so off. And if it had converted, that would have been like a pain in the ass client. You'd have been like, this is so painful. And she probably wouldn't have got the results that she showed up for. And for me, I realized that I was overgiving in my discovery calls. I was setting them up half an hour, and we were flowing on to 45 minutes into the hour. And certainly at the beginning of my coaching journey, I realized that was because it was taking me too long to get to the point of speaking to them about working together, if they were a good fit. And I was starting to coach them. I was starting to listen very intently to things that weren't necessarily relevant. I know, like, anybody that's done this will know what I'm talking about. You know, where you ask somebody, so, what are you trying to achieve in your business? And they start the answer with, well, in 1997, or when I was 12, and you just go, this is going to be a tricky one, because actually they may be very interesting. You may feel a great deal of alignment with them, but this isn't the place to be going into that level of detail, because it's going to firstly take too long. And secondly, it probably isn't going to get you to a place where you're going to be able to add the best value, decide whether that's a great fit, decide whether you'd want to work together in the future, and you can help them get that result for themselves. So having boundaries about things like that, I realized what was going wrong. And to add, Suzanne, it won't surprise you that those people were the least likely to convert. and also the people least likely to also be the best fit clients, the soul clients that I described. So I realized, hang on a minute, this isn't serving them. We're not getting to a place that's going to help them move forward, which is why we've put this call in. You know, if you want to be buds and collaborate, send me a completely different kind of friendship request. But if you want to get help with what you've shown up for, it's incumbent upon me to show up in my power, which means stick to the things that we're here for and show you how you can get that transformation within a container if that is appropriate. Is that something that you've seen for yourself or with clients you've worked with?
This what you've just said there is so much gold, because I think sometimes when we start to set boundaries or realize, hey, we're overgiving or we're people pleasing, we can listen to someone and go, oh, well, I should do that. The point that you've raised, is it bringing up resentment for you? Because some people might love responding and go, oh, the next call's this time, or this kind of thing. Like, if that is in your pleasure, go for it. And this is the thing, noticing in your business, like if your discovery calls going for 2.5 hours rocks your boat, keep doing it. But if it's, you know, it's deciding what feels good and what doesn't feel good for you. And this is where boundaries can go into the next layer again, which it can depend also on your capacity. So how much do you have going on in your life at the moment that you're doing the call? But really realizing with your clients and the people that you're signing on to work with you. So in my program, it's called Why Wait. Everything that's on the sales page is always delivered. Whatever my capacity is, whatever's going on in my own life, that is delivered. That's the minimum. There's always more. There's surprise and delight. There's above and beyond. But I'm very clear on the first call, on the initial call at the beginning. We're doing this round. And here's why. It was not on the sales page. So if it doesn't line up for me, if it's too much of a draw for me, if whatever, don't come back to me and say, well, I signed up for this, because it's not anywhere. So, but, you know, people like, we've introduced this thing that I may end up putting on the sales page, because we've done it for like 4 rounds now, called the radio, which is like a Voxer thread, a voice message thread, and some people have said it's been the most valuable part of the program for them. But I'm like, please don't ever sign up for a future round on that, because if it becomes too much of a capacity spend for me, I will withdraw it from the program. So it's kind of being really clear with your clients. Like, I loved how, what did you call it? Scope creep or whatever?
Brief creep.
Yeah, brief creep, because sometimes you have these great ideas and it feels aligned and it's all awesome and it's going so well. And then things come up in your own life and you're not available the way you were before. Because I think, especially for newer entrepreneurs, when we have a lot of time, we can be like, oh, I'll go over with the sessions. And then people get used to that. And then as you start to fill up your time, or you have other things on, they might feel that you're cutting them short or you don't care about them anymore, when they're actually getting what they've paid you for. So I loved how you described it too. It's like, if we're in flow, I'm going to ask, can we keep going? But if I've got a hard stop, you know, and knowing that, how you go into your session. So like when I coach my group coaching calls, I don't book anything for hours afterward, and they go as long as they go. But everybody is clear. Like, I inform them, you can come for an hour, you can stay the whole time. If you need to jump off, that's okay. In my world, cameras on or off is okay. Eating is okay. And your kids in the background is okay. But in other places, they don't have that. But I think so often we're so scared to convey that boundary because of how other people will feel, that we don't, and then the person doesn't know. And like, I remember I was talking to a client recently and she said she did this in-person thing and she catered it. And she's like, and nobody ate the food. And I was really kind of upset. It cost me all this money and whatever. And I'm like, did you offer the food to people? She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, did you say, hey, grab a bite or whatever? She's like, why would I do that? It's like, if I go somewhere and I see food, my thought would be, that's the higher ticket price, or that's for other people. I wouldn't go and just help myself to a plate. I said, just send them an email and ask. And she's like, do you know, you were right. People thought the food was extra. So I think sometimes Brene Brown says it best, clear is kind. What is included, what's not included, what's the expectation here, so that people know.
And I think we've covered so much in this chat about the benefit of boundaries to ourselves, but we've also talked about the benefit of boundaries for our clients. And it's just occurred to me as you were speaking that we model for our clients. You specialize in boundaries. Boundaries is a big part of the work I do to help my clients attract their soul-aligned clients. And I think that for every coach, irrespective of whether it's part of your program specifically, modeling the way that they need to behave, whether that's in how you conduct yourself for your morning routine or how you conduct yourself for giving spaciousness in the evenings, you have to model it to enable your clients to have the best opportunity for success and for their great outcome. I think that when I realized that most, I really wanted to do a Voxer day. I heard you talking about Voxer. I was like, I want to offer Voxer to my clients. But my first thought I'm going to be beholden to this walkie-talkie all day long. I'm going to be out with my kids. I'm going to be on other client calls, and I'm going to have to keep responding all day long. And it put me off for a long time until I was in a container with a coach who offered me Voxer. And I was like, well, hey, this is fantastic. She's such an amazing coach. Can't wait to get her personal view in the Voxer. And I remember leaving, I'm almost embarrassed, but it's okay. We're all friends here. I'm going to share, honestly. I just left her so many messages. I was like, she is an awesome coach. I really want her point of view on all this stuff. So I started leaving messages and she replied. And so I left her more messages and then she didn't reply. And I had to wait a whole 24 hours until the next day. And then suddenly she replied. And I did it again. I was like, oh, yeah, this is amazing. Here's my thoughts, blah, 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 blah. But she said nothing until 24 hours later. And then again, she replied. And it suddenly struck me. She only checks her Voxer notes once a day, clearly in her morning time. And irrespective of how many messages I've left throughout the day, I will not get an answer till that same time tomorrow. In retrospect, I will say that I wish she'd told me. I check my Voxers at, between 10 and 12 every day, and I will reply then. It actually was beholden to me to kind of work it out. But when I did, I felt really secure knowing she would reply tomorrow. And also a bit of a realization that I was bombarding her with so many messages. And of course, why should she reply throughout her entire day? That wasn't the container in which I bought, complete attention all day long. Of course not. And it freed me to actually feel empowered to create Voxer for my private clients too. And that's a way I love communicating with them. But I do set it up and I say, listen, I check my messages between this hour and this hour, not to say you won't occasionally get a message from me outside of those times, because I'm flex. But if you don't hear from me, these are the times that you will definitely be hearing from me. And actually I have beautiful relationships with my clients through Voxer now. And it's a thrilling part of my offer because we get to do that work, but in a really boundaried way that feels good for both of us.
That is such a beautiful example of, brave, beautiful boundaries. So I have Voxer for my one-to-one clients, and, I answer during business hours. These are the days that I work. You are free. And also too, I have clients around the world. I'm like, my ability to put my phone on airplane is my responsibility. So you can message me at any time. And this is when I'll respond, but so that people know, because it's safe when it's safe. And in my group, it's interesting, in my group program, I don't coach in the community. I'm very clear. Like a lot of group programs do that. Like people write something and the coach responds and people write something. I work with people pleasers. The reason I don't do it is sometimes, say you write something, Joanna, and the kids are in bed and I've got plenty of time. So I write you a loving coaching reply, and then say, Sarah writes something when I'm picking the kids up from school. And I'm like, oh, I don't, so I'm just like, great job. You've got this. It inadvertently sets up, well, she likes Joanna more than me because Joanna gets a lovely answer and all I get is you've got this. So I basically say, I coach in these times, bring it to a group coaching, and I'll invite people when they write something. Do you want to be coached on this? Put it in the thread. But, in terms of my community, the Voxer is more just a chat, a connection. Are we doing the doing, kind of accountability, loving? And also just, we've got one person at the moment who's in Thailand and she's talking about her holiday. We have somebody who's snowed in because you guys, it's freezing, and over here it's hot. And it's just that chit chat, like doing life together. But it's learning that if somebody doesn't respond to you, it's just such a salve, because it lets go of that need for somebody to validate us. And that's why I think it's really powerful. But it's like setting that up so that people know Because if you don't know and you see, it's like people speaking a language that you don't understand.
It's so interesting because I do the opposite, which is just about, who our soul clients are. So when I'm in my group containers, I do coach within there in my Facebook group. And if I inevitably give a little bit more here or a little bit less there, I put it in my client's power to ask me better questions or to tag me again if I've failed to respond, for them
But I love this, because you say
express
tag
what
to
they want.
me. I say to my clients, don't tag me. It makes me feel like I'm on call. Like, I don't like to be tagged in things. That's a boundary for me. And this is a beautiful example of what you were talking about. You get to decide if you like, if I didn't see it, or if I didn't like, tag me again. And this is what's so great for everyone listening about communicating our boundaries to people, because, and seeing what feels good for us. Because if it feels good for you, do it. If you love coaching in community, coaching in community. But like for me, I'm like, I have group coaching calls. And when I coach in the community and people don't come to the calls, I'm like, I'm just sitting here kind of chatting to myself. But what works best for you and gets the best result for you and for your client.
Yeah, I think the outcome here is decide. Don't be unconscious about it. I mean, I hope that this conversation has prompted many people to start looking again at how they're working and what's lighting them up and what is depleting them and is pushing their boundaries, so they can make better decisions about what they want their business to look like, clear up more space on that calendar, create that spaciousness in their lives and their business so they can have a sustainable, joyful business for years to come. Suzanne, the conversation, I've got to be honest, could go on another hour, but I'm going to reluctantly draw it to a close and invite you, as I always do, to share an inspired action piece that anybody listening could do easily when they finish listening to this podcast and help them draw some boundaries within their life and business.
I would encourage anyone listening to open up your calendar, whether it be Outlook, Google, pen and paper, however you use your calendar, and do like an audit, like have a look through it at, your client list and whatever. What feelings come up in your body as you look at it? Like, not from judgment, observation. They say observation is power and judgment is weakness. But observing, it's like, oh, okay, that Friday is looking overloaded. Like, I feel in my body like Friday's going to be bad. Like, and then doesn't mean you need to go and change this all tomorrow. Like, I think the thing about, sustainable boundaries is going, okay, so how do I want it to look ideally? It's like, actually, for me, I only work a 3-day week now. This is new for 2023. I was doing 5, then 4, then 3. Actually, I was doing 7, if I'm honest. But, but backing it off, because I think so often we go into this extremist archetype, all or nothing. It's like, I'm dieting or I'm binging. There's no in between. So it's like, okay, ideally, I want it to look like this. This is how it looks right now. These are the things I'm going to tidy up. And are there any conversations that you need to start to have? And if it's too confronting and scary to have with current clients, which it might be, for people that you're calling in, like for your next client, these are the boundaries I'm going to set. This is my onboarding sequence, or this is my client agreement. Do I need to have in here that, it's a 6-month? So for me, my 6 months in the beginning was 18 months. Like, people wouldn't book their sessions, so I'd just keep going. And then I was offering the support in between. So why would people book in? They're still getting email, they're still getting voice message. So you might be like, okay, I'm going to look at my current onboarding and my client agreement. I'm going to make it 6 months, and I'm going to say, from this day, any sessions unused are forfeit. So going forward, you have that boundary, because when you set boundaries with new people coming into your world and that starts to feel comfortable, it then becomes easier to set boundaries with current people already in your containers.
Fantastic. Thank you, Suzanne. And if people want to find you online, where's the best place for that?
My website, so suzanneculberg.com, SUZANNECULBERG. There's a big thing that says newsletter. If you sign up for that, you'll get an email from me. And the best way to contact me is email. I don't do DMs. So I'm very unusual in the entrepreneur world like that, because one day my son said to me that I loved my phone more than him. And in that moment, my life changed. I removed all notifications. I deleted email off my phone. And from then on, I set a boundary that I conduct business via email. And, that works for me. And, if something else, if someone does send me a DM, I say, hey, send me an email. Let's chat.
I'm laughing because like that, I'm responding, I think, somatically to what you've just said. And I wish we could go into more detail now, but I know people are listening who are like, whoa, that's hit a point. Wow, Suzanne has deleted it all and is dealing with it like we used to in the office by email.
Like in the old days.
In the old days, right? In the office. Wow, thank you so much.
It's not quite the old days. There's no pen and paper. It's email, but
yeah, I mean,
pen and paper coaching.
Given so much inspiration about boundaries, and it's massive food for thought. It's really valuable stuff in this chat. So thank you so much, Suzanne, for joining us on Goals with Soul, and hope that we can hear from you again soon. Obviously not on social media, but obviously listening to your podcast too. What's that called if anybody wants to tune in?
It's Over It with Christine and Suzanne.
Fantastic. Thank you, Suzanne. And if you're a coach who is tired of inauthentic marketing tactics, who wants to be desired by your dream clients for your expertise and be paid very well for exactly who you are, and you know what it feels like to be energetically drained by clients and totally ready for your next up level in client attraction, then it's time to elevate your brand messaging and your client attraction energy. Right now, I'm looking for 5 energized, successful, high-achieving coaches who want to up-level their authentic brand messaging and call in their most aligned clients ever. If that's you, send me a DM over on Instagram. I'm on @IamJo.Ingram and I will share the details. And so have an inspired action week. Take care. Bye now.